years. Now, that train derailment in Springfield intensifying calls for rail safety. This is cleanup efforts continue following the derailment Saturday. Now, we are also finding out what kinds of hazardous materials were on the train cars that did not derail. Mamie Boss spent the day combing through the manifest and speaking with experts. What have you learned, Mamie?
Well, Adam, we've learned a lot of information today, but first I want to give you a look here at State Route 41 near Gateway Boulevard. You can see some of those train cars are right there. Cleanup efforts still continuing here. You still have one of those tankers that we showed you yesterday still in the same spot. I mentioned yesterday that this will be a days-long event, and it still continues now. This was a long train, 212 train cars, longer than the East Palestine train. According to train documents, 30 of those train cars were carrying hazardous materials, benzene and other materials. Norfolk Southern officials tell us none of the derailed cars were carrying any hazardous materials. Now, this train derailment is increasing the calls for lawmakers on Capitol Hill to act fast. I spoke to Senator J.D. Vance about the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act of 2023. Cleanup efforts continue in Springfield on State Route 41 near Gateway Boulevard. After 28 train cars derailed Saturday evening, Dayton 24/7 Now Skyview drone capturing the aftermath. Some cars off the tracks, others overlapping. It's the second Norfolk Southern train to derail in Ohio within a month. These cars did not contain hazardous materials, but such materials were aboard the 212-car train. According to these documents, 30 cars were carrying chemicals. Mark McClain, professor of chemistry at Cedarville University, tells me what they are.
Hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid, alcohols. It was alcohols NOS, which means not otherwise specified. Liquefied petroleum gas, benzene. There was a tanker full of pentanes.
The train cars carrying the chemicals did not derail. Norfolk Southern says there was no spillage, unlike what happened in East Palestine when the derailment led to an explosion due to vinyl chloride. Had the cars that did have hazardous materials derailed, it could have been a recipe for disaster.
Fire was probably the most likely scenario.
The state was not aware that there were hazardous materials on the Clark County train. The Ohio EPA says if those materials are under a certain amount, a company doesn't have to disclose it. But a bipartisan bill plans to change that.
It will force notice to local authorities of what's on these trains to begin with. You can't have a situation where firefighters go into a train crash and they don't know what they're dealing with.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Democrat Sherrod Brown unveiled the Railway Safety Act last week. The bill would not only include notifying agencies of hazardous materials, but also train inspections, require two-person crews on every train, significantly increase the maximum fines for safety violations. The bill would also create a nationwide standard for devices that detect overheating and other mechanical issues and mandate that they scan the train every 10 miles. Right now, the railroad companies have to meet minimum standards. Do you think minimum and or low regulation for railroad companies are to blame for what's going on in this situation?
I think you have some improper incentives in the rail industry. I think that you have some safety standards that have probably degraded over time. I think that you have, frankly, an industry that just hasn't had, I think, a real update of safety standards. Senator Vance and so many others saying it's about public safety, something residents here in Springfield and across Ohio are asking for. The senator couldn't tell me exactly when this bill will become law, but he tells me he believes it'll happen sooner rather than later. Reporting in Clark County, Mimi Ba, Dayton 24/7 Now News.